Sarah Mitchell had always been different from other girls in her small Montana town. While her classmates spent weekends at the mall or talking about boys, she could be found at her grandfather's ranch, learning the delicate art of precision shooting. The old man, a retired military sniper, saw something special in his granddaughter's steady hands and unwavering focus that others dismissed as mere tomboyish behavior. The year was 2018, and Sarah had just turned 22. She worked part-time at the local sporting goods store while pursuing her engineering degree online. Her colleagues at Thompson's Outdoor Supply knew she could shoot, but they treated it like a novelty act. Comments like "pretty good for a girl" and patronizing smiles followed her everywhere. Even her boyfriend, Jake, would chuckle when she talked about competitive shooting, suggesting she take up something more feminine like photography instead. What nobody understood was the countless hours Sarah spent perfecting her craft. Every morning before dawn, she would drive out to the remote canyon her grandfather had shown her, where distances stretched far beyond what most recreational shooters ever attempted. The old Winchester Model 70 and .300 Winchester Magnum had been her grandfather's service rifle, modified over the years with a custom barrel and precision optics. In Sarah's hands, it became an extension of her will. The rifle itself was unremarkable to look at, its worn wooden stock bearing the scars of decades of use. But Sarah knew every inch of that weapon, every subtle vibration it made, how it responded to temperature changes, wind conditions, and her own breathing patterns. She had fired thousands of rounds through it, documenting every shot, every variable, building an intimate relationship with the firearm that went far beyond mere familiarity. Her grandfather, Thomas Mitchell, had served 3 tours in Vietnam as a Marine Scout sniper. He returned home with stories he rarely shared and skills that seemed almost supernatural to young Sarah. When she was 12, he began teaching her the fundamentals, not just of shooting, but of patience, calculation, and the mental discipline required for extreme precision work. Most people saw an old man teaching his granddaughter to plink at tin cans. Thomas saw potential that reminded him of the best marksmen he had served alongside. The shooting community in their area was small and tight-knit, dominated by older men who had been hunting and competing for decades. When Sarah began showing up at local competitions, she was initially welcomed with the kind of condescending encouragement typically reserved for children and beginners. Her early performances were respectable but not exceptional, placing her in the middle of the pack among seasoned competitors who had been shooting longer than she had been alive. But Sarah was learning, absorbing every lesson, every piece of advice, every criticism. She studied ballistics with the same intensity she applied to her engineering coursework, understanding the physics behind every shot. Wind patterns, atmospheric pressure, temperature variations, the Coriolis effect on long-range shots, all became variables in complex equations she solved instinctively. The local shooting range only went out to 600 yards, which most considered more than adequate for hunting or sport shooting. Sarah had mastered that distance within her first year of serious competition. But her grandfather had taught her to think bigger, to push boundaries that others accepted as limits. The canyon where they practiced stretched nearly 2 miles, offering opportunities to test skills that few shooters would ever need or dare to attempt. Her first successful shot at 1,000 yards came on a windless morning in early spring. The target, a steel plate barely visible to the naked eye, rang with the impact of her carefully calculated shot. Her grandfather stood beside her, timer in hand, nodding with the quiet satisfaction of a teacher watching his student exceed expectations. But even he was surprised when Sarah began consistently hitting targets at 1,500 yards, then 2,000 yards, distances where the curvature of the earth itself became a factor in trajectory calculations. The local shooting community remained largely unaware of Sarah's developing abilities. Competition distances rarely exceeded 1,000 yards, and she continued to perform well but not spectacularly at sanctioned events. She had learned to moderate her abilities, not wanting to attract the wrong kind of attention or deal with the inevitable accusations that would follow exceptional performance by someone so young and inexperienced in the eyes of her peers. Jake, her boyfriend of 2 years, represented the broader community's attitude toward her shooting. He was proud in a superficial way, enjoying the novelty of dating a girl who could shoot, but he fundamentally didn't understand the depth of her commitment or skill. When she talked about her goals, about pushing the boundaries of what was considered possible, he would laugh and suggest she was getting carried away with herself. Her co-workers at the sporting goods store were similarly dismissive. They would joke about her being the store's secret weapon when difficult customers came in with technical questions, but they treated her expertise as an amusing quirk rather than genuine knowledge. When sales representatives from major ammunition and optics companies visited the store, they would invariably direct their technical discussions toward her male colleagues, assuming Sarah was there to handle paperwork and customer service rather than provide expert advice. This constant underestimation had begun to wear on Sarah, but it also motivated her. Every dismissive comment, every patronizing smile, every suggestion that she should find more appropriate hobbies, fueled her determination to prove that skill and dedication mattered more than assumptions and stereotypes. She had something to prove, not just to herself, but to everyone who had ever looked at her and seen limitations rather than potential. The shooting world was about to discover what Thomas Mitchell had known for years: his granddaughter possessed a rare combination of natural ability, technical knowledge, and mental discipline that could not be taught or faked. Sarah was ready to demonstrate that the most dangerous assumptions are the ones we make about people who don't fit our expectations. As autumn approached, Sarah began preparing for what would become the most talked about shooting demonstration in the region's history. She had no idea that a single shot would transform her from an underestimated amateur into a legend whose name would be spoken with respect and awe throughout the shooting community. The stage was set for a revelation that would shatter every preconception about what was possible, and who was capable of achieving it. October arrived with the kind of crisp mountain air that made for perfect shooting conditions. Sarah Mitchell had been quietly preparing for months, but she had no idea that circumstances were about to thrust her into the spotlight in the most dramatic way possible. The catalyst came from an unexpected source: Marcus Hendricks, a former Army Ranger turned competitive shooter who had recently moved to the area and quickly established himself as the local authority on all things related to precision marksmanship. Hendricks was everything Sarah was not in the eyes of the shooting community. He was a decorated veteran with confirmed combat kills, a man whose credentials were unquestioned and whose opinions carried weight among the local shooters. At 45, he had the weathered look of someone who had seen serious action, and he spoke with the confident authority of someone accustomed to being the most skilled person in any room he entered. The confrontation began innocuously enough at Thompson's Outdoor Supply on a busy Saturday morning. Hendricks had come in looking for specialized ammunition for an upcoming long-range competition, and the conversation naturally turned to the local shooting scene. Sarah was behind the counter, helping customers and restocking inventory, when Hendricks began holding court with several local shooters who had gathered around the gun counter. He was discussing the limitations of civilian shooters compared to military-trained marksmen, explaining how real precision shooting required not just technical skill but the kind of mental toughness that could only be forged in combat situations. His audience was hanging on every word, nodding in agreement as he described shots he had made in Afghanistan and Iraq, engagements where missing meant the difference between life and death for his fellow soldiers. Sarah had been listening while working, initially with the respect due to someone with genuine experience. But, as Hendricks continued talking, his commentary took on a distinctly dismissive tone toward civilian shooters, particularly those who practiced at what he called playground distances under perfect conditions. He made several comments about weekend warriors who thought they could shoot because they had managed to hit targets at a few hundred yards with expensive equipment and unlimited time to prepare. The conversation might have ended there, but Jake chose that moment to arrive at the store. In what he probably thought was a gesture of pride and support for his girlfriend, he mentioned that Sarah was quite a shooter herself, even suggesting that she might be able to give Hendricks some local insights into the best shooting locations in the area. The comment was well-intentioned but revealed Jake's complete misunderstanding of both Sarah's abilities and the dynamic he was walking into. Hendricks turned to look at Sarah with the kind of polite but dismissive attention one might give to a child who had announced their intention to become an astronaut. He asked about her shooting experience with the tone of someone making conversation rather than seeking genuine information. Sarah answered modestly, mentioning that she had been shooting competitively for several years and enjoyed practicing at longer distances when possible. This prompted Hendricks to launch into a lecture about the differences between recreational shooting and serious precision work. He explained how real long-range shooting required understanding of advanced ballistics, environmental factors that most civilian shooters never encountered, and split-second decision-making under pressure. He spoke about shots he had made at distances exceeding 1,200 yards, engagements that required not just technical skill but the ability to perform under the kind of stress that most people could never imagine. The group around the counter was clearly impressed, and several of the local shooters began sharing their own stories, though none came close to matching Hendricks' claimed achievements. Sarah continued working, but she found herself increasingly irritated by the man's condescending attitude and his apparent assumption that civilian shooters were inherently inferior to their military counterparts. The tipping point came when one of the locals, probably trying to be helpful, mentioned that Sarah had been seen practicing at some pretty impressive distances out at the old canyon. Hendricks responded with a knowing smile, explaining that he had heard similar claims from many civilian shooters over the years, but that there was a significant difference between hitting a large target at a known distance under perfect conditions and making precision shots under combat conditions. He then made a comment that would prove to be spectacularly ill-advised. Looking directly at Sarah, he suggested that while he was sure she was a capable recreational shooter, real precision marksmanship was something entirely different. He offered to take her out to the range sometime and show her some advanced techniques that might help her improve her shooting, speaking with the patronizing tone of someone offering to teach a child to tie their shoes. Sarah felt something snap inside her. Months of condescension and dismissive attitudes from people who had never bothered to actually test her abilities had finally reached a breaking point. She looked up from the inventory she was organizing and asked, quietly but clearly, what kind of distances Hendricks considered to be real precision shooting. Hendricks seemed pleased to have engaged her in technical discussion. He explained that serious long-range work began at around 800 yards, became challenging at 1,000 yards, and required true expertise beyond 1,200 yards. He mentioned that his longest confirmed shot had been at 1,487 yards, made under combat conditions in Afghanistan with a standard military rifle and issued ammunition. Sarah nodded thoughtfully, then asked if he would be interested in a demonstration of what civilian shooters could accomplish with proper training and equipment. The question caught Hendricks off guard, and he asked what kind of demonstration she had in mind. Sarah suggested that they visit the canyon where she practiced, where distances of nearly 2 miles were possible, and see what could be accomplished under controlled conditions. Hendricks agreed with the confident enthusiasm of someone who expected to provide a teaching moment. He suggested they make it interesting by inviting some of the local shooting community to witness the demonstration, turning it into an educational opportunity for everyone involved. Sarah agreed, but, with one modification, she suggested they make it a proper challenge, with both of them attempting the same shot to demonstrate the difference between military training and civilian practice. The challenge was set for the following Saturday. Word spread quickly through the tight-knit local shooting community, and what had begun as a simple disagreement was rapidly becoming the most anticipated shooting event in the area's recent memory. Bets were placed, sides were chosen, and speculation ran wild about what kind of distances would actually be attempted and whether either shooter would be able to perform under the pressure of public scrutiny. Hendricks spent the week preparing with the methodical approach of someone who took the challenge seriously despite his confidence in the outcome. He researched the canyon location, checked weather forecasts, and even drove out to examine the terrain and estimate distances. He was not about to be embarrassed by underestimating either the venue or his opponent, regardless of how confident he felt about his superior training and experience. Sarah spent the week in her usual preparation routine, but with an added intensity that her grandfather noticed immediately. Thomas Mitchell had heard about the challenge and was concerned about the pressure his granddaughter was putting on herself. He reminded her that she had nothing to prove to anyone, that her abilities spoke for themselves regardless of what others thought or said. But Sarah was beyond such considerations. This was about more than just making a difficult shot. It was about respect, recognition, and the right to be taken seriously in a community that had consistently underestimated her based on assumptions rather than evidence. She was going to demonstrate that skill, dedication, and knowledge mattered more than credentials, combat experience, or gender-based expectations. Saturday morning arrived with perfect conditions, clear skies, minimal wind, and the kind of crisp visibility that made distant targets seem almost touchable. As word continued to spread, the gathering grew beyond the original small group of local shooters. People came from neighboring towns, drawn by curiosity and the kind of anticipation that surrounds any event where reputations are on the line and the outcome is genuinely uncertain. The stage was set for a demonstration that would become legendary in local shooting circles, a single moment that would redefine how an entire community understood skill, assumptions, and the danger of underestimating someone based on appearances rather than abilities. The canyon stretched before them like a natural amphitheater, its walls rising sharply on both sides while the floor extended into the distance until it became a shimmering line where earth met sky. Sarah Mitchell stood at the improvised firing position, her grandfather's modified Winchester resting on a sturdy bipod, while nearly 50 spectators gathered behind the firing line. What had started as a simple disagreement had evolved into the most significant shooting demonstration the region had ever witnessed. Marcus Hendricks had arrived with military precision, bringing a custom-built rifle system that looked like something from a specialized warfare catalog. His setup included a heavy-barreled .338 Lapua Magnum mounted in a precision chassis system, topped with high-end optics that cost more than most people's cars. The rifle was an impressive piece of engineering, designed specifically for extreme long-range work and backed by decades of military research and development. In contrast, Sarah's rifle looked almost primitive. The old Winchester Model 70, despite its custom modifications, retained the appearance of a hunting rifle that had seen better days. The wood stock showed years of use, and the entire system appeared modest compared to Hendricks' high-tech setup. To the assembled crowd, the visual comparison seemed to perfectly represent the disparity in experience and resources between the two shooters. But appearances were deceiving. Sarah's rifle had been carefully optimized over years of intensive use and modification. Her grandfather had worked with a master gunsmith to true the action, install a match-grade barrel, and develop hand-loaded ammunition that was precisely tuned to the rifle's specifications. Every component had been selected and refined based on actual performance rather than theoretical specifications or marketing claims. The target itself had been the subject of considerable discussion and negotiation. Initially, Hendricks had suggested a standard steel target at 1,200 yards, a distance he considered appropriately challenging without being unrealistic. But Sarah had quietly proposed something more ambitious, a target at 2,900 yards, nearly 1.7 miles, a distance that pushed the boundaries of what most people considered possible even under ideal conditions. The suggestion had been met with skepticism from nearly everyone present, including some questioning whether such a shot was even theoretically possible. Hendricks had initially dismissed it as an unrealistic fantasy, but Sarah had calmly produced ballistic calculations showing that the shot was within the theoretical capabilities of both rifles, assuming perfect conditions and flawless execution. The numbers were sobering: a flight time of nearly 6 seconds, a bullet drop of more than 400 feet, and deflection factors that could be measured in yards rather than inches. After extensive discussion and calculation, a compromise was reached. The primary target would be placed at 2,900 yards, but a secondary target at 1,800 yards would also be available for comparison purposes. Both shooters would attempt both distances, with success measured by hits within a defined target area rather than precise point of impact. The targets themselves were large steel plates, 36 inches square, painted bright orange for maximum visibility through high-power optics. The technical challenges involved in the 2,900-yard shot were staggering. At that distance, the bullet would arc more than 400 feet above the line of sight at its peak trajectory before dropping back down to the target. The flight time would allow for significant wind drift, and even minor variations in atmospheric conditions could cause misses measured in yards rather than inches. The curvature of the Earth itself became a factor, requiring adjustment for the Coriolis effect that most shooters never had to consider. Sarah spent Friday evening making final calculations and preparations. She had been collecting meteorological data for the canyon location for months, understanding how temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure changed throughout the day and how these factors affected bullet performance. Her ballistic computer contained detailed environmental data going back to when she first began shooting at extreme distances in the location. Her ammunition had been prepared weeks in advance, each cartridge individually weighed and measured to ensure consistency. The bullets were match-grade projectiles with exceptional ballistic coefficients, loaded with powder charges that had been tested extensively to provide optimal velocity consistency. Even the brass cases had been carefully prepared, trimmed to exact specifications, and sorted by weight to minimize any variables that could affect shot placement. Hendricks, despite his initial skepticism about the distance, was taking the challenge seriously. His military training had taught him never to underestimate an opponent, regardless of appearances or preconceptions. He spent Friday evening studying topographical maps of the area, calculating wind patterns based on the canyon's geography, and developing contingency plans for various environmental conditions. His ammunition was military-grade match ammo, designed for consistency and performance at extreme ranges. While he hadn't prepared with the same obsessive attention to detail that Sarah had devoted to her hand-loaded cartridges, his factory ammunition was of exceptional quality and had proven itself in demanding conditions around the world. The weather forecast for Saturday remained favorable, with light winds and clear skies expected throughout the morning. However, both shooters understood that conditions could change rapidly in the mountain environment, and they would need to adapt their calculations accordingly. The canyon's unique geography created wind patterns that were difficult to predict, with air currents that could shift direction and intensity based on subtle temperature changes and atmospheric pressure variations. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect clarity that photographers dream of and precision shooters live for. The air was still, visibility was unlimited, and the temperature was cool enough to ensure optimal ballistic performance. As spectators began arriving, the atmosphere carried the tension of a major sporting event, with clusters of people discussing the challenge, debating the likelihood of success, and placing informal wagers on the outcome. Sarah arrived early with her grandfather, taking advantage of the quiet morning hours to verify her equipment and make final environmental calculations. She checked the rifle's 0 at 100 yards, confirmed that her optics were properly calibrated, and took detailed readings of wind speed, direction, temperature, and humidity. Every measurement was recorded in a notebook that contained months of similar data from the same location. Her preparation routine was methodical and unhurried, reflecting years of practice and the kind of disciplined approach that her grandfather had drilled into her from the beginning. She understood that success at extreme range required more than just technical knowledge, it demanded mental discipline, emotional control, and the ability to execute under pressure. Hendricks arrived shortly after sunrise, bringing with him several assistants who helped set up his equipment and establish a detailed firing position. His approach was professional and systematic, reflecting military training and combat experience. He established wind flags at various points along the range, set up sophisticated meteorological monitoring equipment, and spent considerable time studying the target through high-power optics. As the crowd gathered, the contrast between the two shooters became increasingly apparent. Hendricks represented everything the community expected from a serious marksman: military credentials, professional equipment, systematic methodology, and the confident demeanor of someone accustomed to success in high-pressure situations. Sarah appeared almost casual by comparison, working quietly with her grandfather to prepare equipment that looked almost antique compared to her opponent's high-tech setup. But those who knew Sarah well, particularly her grandfather, could see the focused intensity that she brought to her preparation. This was not casual recreational shooting, this was the culmination of years of dedicated practice, systematic learning, and gradual development of skills that most people never had the opportunity or dedication to acquire. The targets had been placed the previous afternoon, with precise distance measurements confirmed by multiple methods including GPS coordinates and laser rangefinding. Steel plates were positioned at both 1,800 and 2,900 yards, clearly visible through high-power optics but appearing as mere specks to the naked eye. The longer distance target was barely discernible even with binoculars, requiring telescope-level magnification to be clearly identified. As the morning progressed and the crowd grew, the challenge took on the atmosphere of a historic event. Word had spread throughout the regional shooting community, and spectators had driven from hundreds of miles away to witness what many believed would be either a spectacular success or an expensive demonstration of the limitations of civilian marksmanship. The stage was set for a demonstration that would be remembered and discussed for years to come, a single moment that would either validate Sarah's quiet confidence or confirm the assumptions that had followed her throughout her shooting career. The mathematics had been calculated, the equipment prepared, and the conditions were as perfect as anyone could hope for. All that remained was the execution of a shot that would test the absolute limits of human skill and equipment capability. The moment of truth. The morning sun had risen high enough to eliminate shadows from the canyon floor, creating the kind of even lighting that precision shooters prefer for extreme distance work. By 9 o'clock, nearly 70 people had gathered behind the firing line, creating the largest shooting event the area had ever witnessed. The crowd included local hunters, competitive shooters, military veterans, and curious spectators drawn by word-of-mouth accounts of what was being attempted. Marcus Hendricks had won the coin toss and elected to shoot first, a decision that would allow him to demonstrate proper technique while potentially putting pressure on Sarah to match or exceed his performance. As he settled into position behind his precision rifle system, the crowd fell silent with the kind of respectful attention typically reserved for professional sporting events or military ceremonies. His shooting position was textbook perfect, reflecting decades of training and combat experience. The custom rifle rested solidly on its bipod, with Hendricks positioned behind it in a prone stance that minimized his exposure to wind and maximized his stability. Through his high-power scope, the target at 1,800 yards appeared as a clear orange square, challenging but certainly within the capabilities of both his equipment and his skills. The shot broke cleanly with the distinctive crack of a high-velocity cartridge. Nearly 3 seconds later, observers with spotting scopes called out a hit, confirming that Hendricks had successfully engaged the closer target. The crowd responded with appreciative murmurs and scattered applause, recognizing the skill required to make such a shot even under ideal conditions. Emboldened by his success and the crowd's positive response, Hendricks moved to engage the primary target at 2,900 yards. This was the shot that would define the challenge, the distance that pushed beyond normal civilian experience into the realm of theoretical possibility. Through his scope, the target was barely visible even at maximum magnification, appearing as a tiny orange speck that seemed to waver in the heat shimmer despite the cool morning air. His calculations were precise, based on standard military ballistic data and environmental measurements taken throughout the morning. The scope adjustments required were massive, more than 300 clicks of elevation and additional adjustments for windage that represented the accumulated effect of nearly 6 seconds of bullet flight time. The mathematics were complex, but they were within the range of his training and experience. The shot felt perfect as it broke, with the kind of clean trigger release that every precision shooter strives for. The crowd watched in tense silence as seconds ticked by, waiting for the sound of impact that would confirm success or the absence of sound that would indicate a miss. Through spotting scopes, observers scanned the target area, looking for the telltale puff of dust or spark of metal that would indicate bullet impact. 6 seconds passed, then 10, then 15. No impact was observed. The shot had missed, though where it had gone remained a mystery. Hendricks, to his credit, accepted the result with professional composure, acknowledging that the distance was at the extreme limit of what was possible even under perfect conditions. Many in the crowd nodded in understanding, recognizing that what he had attempted was extraordinarily difficult. Now it was Sarah's turn. She approached her firing position with the same quiet intensity she had displayed throughout her preparation, carrying her grandfather's old Winchester as if it were a sacred relic rather than a tool. The contrast with Hendricks' high-tech setup was even more pronounced now, with Sarah's modest equipment appearing almost primitive by comparison. Her shooting position was fundamentally sound but lacked the military precision of Hendricks' stance. She settled behind the rifle naturally, like someone returning to a familiar and comfortable place. Through her scope, which was high quality but not nearly as sophisticated as her opponent's optics, the 1,800-yard target appeared as a manageable challenge rather than an extreme test of skill. The first shot broke with the authority of someone who had fired thousands of similar rounds. The bullet's flight seemed to last forever, but exactly 2.8 seconds after the shot, observers confirmed a solid hit on the steel target. Sarah had matched Hendricks' success at the closer distance, demonstrating that her equipment and skills were certainly adequate for serious long-range work. But it was the 2,900-yard shot that everyone had come to see. This was the distance that separated the possible from the theoretical, the shot that would either validate Sarah's quiet confidence or expose her claims as the delusions of an overconfident amateur. As she prepared for the extreme distance shot, the crowd grew completely silent, sensing that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Sarah's calculation process was different from Hendricks' systematic military approach. Instead of referring to ballistic tables or computer calculations, she seemed to be drawing on an intuitive understanding of how her specific rifle performed under these exact conditions. She made scope adjustments with the confidence of someone who had fired this precise shot before, though everyone assumed that was impossible given the extreme distance involved. Her breathing settled into the controlled rhythm that precision shooters use to minimize movement during the crucial seconds before shot release. Through her scope, the target was barely visible, a tiny speck of orange that required perfect focus and unwavering concentration to maintain visual contact. The crosshairs seemed to dance slightly in the thermal currents, but Sarah had learned to time her shots to coincide with moments of perfect stability. The trigger broke with mechanical precision, releasing a cartridge that represented months of preparation, years of practice, and a lifetime of dedication to the art of precision shooting. The sound echoed off the canyon walls as the bullet began its long journey through the morning air, carrying with it the hopes and skepticism of everyone watching. Time seemed suspended as the bullet flew its impossible trajectory. In the perfect silence that followed the shot, the only sounds were the gentle whisper of morning breeze and the distant call of a hawk circling high above the canyon. Spectators held their collective breath, knowing that success or failure would be determined in the next few seconds. The bullet's flight time at that distance was nearly 6 seconds, an eternity in the compressed timeframe of precision shooting. During those seconds, Sarah remained perfectly still behind her rifle, maintaining her sight picture and following through with the kind of professional discipline that separates serious shooters from casual enthusiasts. 5 seconds passed. 6 seconds. 7 seconds. Then, cutting through the morning stillness like a bell, came the distinctive ring of bullet striking steel. The sound was unmistakable, carrying clearly across the distance that separated the firing line from the target area. For a moment, nobody moved, as if the entire crowd was processing what they had just witnessed. Then, the dam broke. Spotters with high-power scopes confirmed what everyone had heard. The target showed a clear bullet impact, slightly left of center but undeniably within the scoring area. Sarah Mitchell, shooting her grandfather's old hunting rifle, had successfully engaged a target at 2,900 yards, accomplishing what many in the crowd had believed was impossible. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Cheers erupted from portions of the crowd, while others stood in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Jake stood among the spectators, his mouth open in amazement, finally understanding that his girlfriend possessed abilities he had never imagined possible. Marcus Hendricks was among the first to approach Sarah, extending his hand in congratulations with the kind of professional respect that one expert shooter gives to another. His initial skepticism had been completely replaced by genuine admiration for a demonstration of skill that exceeded his own considerable abilities. He understood better than most just how difficult the shot had been and what level of preparation and practice would have been required to achieve such success. But, for Sarah, the successful shot represented more than just technical achievement. It was validation of years of dedication, proof that skill and knowledge could overcome assumptions and prejudices, and demonstration that excellence could emerge from the most unexpected sources. As she accepted congratulations from the crowd, she was already thinking about the next challenge, the next distance, the next opportunity to push beyond what others considered possible. The single shot had transformed her from an underestimated amateur into a recognized expert, earning respect that could never again be questioned or dismissed. In a community that valued skill above all else, she had proven herself in the most definitive way possible, through performance that spoke louder than any credentials or qualifications ever could. Word of Sarah Mitchell's extraordinary shot spread through the shooting community like wildfire. Within hours, cell phone videos and photos from the demonstration were being shared across social media platforms, discussion forums, and email networks that connected precision shooters across the country. The grainy footage of a young woman with an old hunting rifle accomplishing what many considered impossible captured the imagination of marksmen who understood exactly how difficult such a shot truly was. The immediate aftermath of the demonstration was unlike anything the local shooting community had ever experienced. Sarah found herself surrounded by people who had spent years dismissing her abilities, now eager to understand how she had developed the skills to make such an incredible shot. Questions came from every direction about her training methods, her equipment modifications, her ammunition specifications, and her mental preparation techniques. Marcus Hendricks, despite his own missed shot, became one of Sarah's most vocal advocates. His military credentials and established reputation gave weight to his assessment of her abilities, and he made it clear to anyone who would listen that what he had witnessed represented world-class marksmanship by any standard. His public acknowledgement of her superior skill carried particular significance given his initial skepticism and the circumstances that had led to the challenge. The technical aspects of Sarah's success became the subject of intense analysis and debate. Ballistics experts examined her calculations, equipment specialists studied her rifle modifications, and ammunition manufacturers expressed interest in the hand-loaded cartridges that had made the shot possible. The combination of her grandfather's accumulated wisdom, Sarah's engineering background, and years of methodical practice had created a synergy that exceeded what anyone had thought possible with seemingly modest equipment. Within a week, Sarah received her first invitation to a major precision shooting competition, followed quickly by several more. Event organizers who had never heard her name were suddenly interested in having her participate in matches that typically featured only the most accomplished marksmen in the country. The shooting that had begun as a response to condescension had transformed into an entry point for national-level competition. Her grandfather, Thomas Mitchell, watched the aftermath of the demonstration with mixed emotions. Pride in his granddaughter's achievement was tempered by concerns about the attention and pressure that would inevitably follow. He had seen how public recognition could change people, and he worried about whether Sarah was prepared for the expectations that would now follow her everywhere she went. But Sarah handled the attention with the same quiet confidence she had shown throughout her shooting development. She answered technical questions thoughtfully and, completely, shared her knowledge freely with anyone genuinely interested in learning, and remained remarkably humble about an achievement that others were calling extraordinary. Her response to success revealed character traits that impressed people even more than her marksmanship abilities. The economic impact on Thompson's outdoor supply was immediate and dramatic. Customers began visiting specifically to meet Sarah and seek her advice on equipment and techniques. Sales of precision shooting gear increased substantially as word spread that the store employed someone with world-class abilities. The owner, who had initially hired Sarah part-time to handle basic customer service, found himself promoting her to head of the technical department and offering a substantial raise to ensure she remained with the company. Jake's relationship with Sarah underwent a fundamental transformation in the weeks following the demonstration. The casual dismissiveness he had shown toward her shooting was replaced by a new respect and, if he was honest with himself, some intimidation. He began to realize that he had been dating someone whose abilities far exceeded his understanding, and the recognition was both humbling and somewhat uncomfortable for someone accustomed to being the more accomplished partner in the relationship. More significantly, Sarah's achievement had implications that extended far beyond the local shooting community. Women in other male-dominated technical fields began citing her success as an example of what was possible when skill and dedication were allowed to speak for themselves. Her story became part of larger conversations about assumptions, stereotypes, and the dangers of underestimating people based on demographics rather than demonstrated ability. Professional opportunities began emerging from unexpected sources. Defense contractors expressed interest in consulting arrangements, optics manufacturers wanted to discuss endorsement possibilities, and ammunition companies inquired about technical development partnerships. The same abilities that had been dismissed as a hobby were suddenly recognized as commercially valuable expertise. The canyon location where the demonstration had taken place became something of a pilgrimage site for serious long-range shooters. People began making trips from hundreds of miles away, hoping to attempt similar distances and understand the unique conditions that had made Sarah's shot possible. The local economy benefited from the influx of visitors, and the area's reputation as a destination for extreme precision shooting became established almost overnight. Educational institutions also took notice of Sarah's achievement. Several engineering programs reached out to discuss speaking opportunities, recognizing the value of her example in demonstrating practical applications of physics, mathematics, and technical problem-solving. Her story became a case study in how theoretical knowledge could be applied to achieve extraordinary results in specialized fields. Perhaps most importantly, the shooting community itself began to change in response to Sarah's example. The casual assumptions about gender, age, and credentials that had characterized many shooters' attitudes were challenged by undeniable evidence that skill could emerge from unexpected sources. Young women interested in precision shooting found themselves welcomed more readily and taken more seriously than they might have been before Sarah's demonstration. Sarah's approach to her newfound recognition reflected the same methodical thinking she applied to long-range shooting. She carefully selected opportunities that aligned with her interests and values, declining offers that seemed exploitative or contrary to her principles. Her goal was not celebrity but, rather, the chance to continue developing her abilities while helping others understand what was possible with dedication and proper preparation. The rifle that had made the famous shot became something of a legend itself. Requests to examine the old Winchester came from technical experts, collectors, and curious shooters who wanted to understand how such modest equipment could achieve such extraordinary results. Sarah accommodated reasonable requests while maintaining possession of the rifle that had become so closely associated with her achievement. Training requests began arriving from all levels of the shooting community, from beginners seeking basic instruction to experienced marksmen hoping to improve their extreme range capabilities. Sarah found herself developing teaching skills to match her shooting abilities, discovering that she had both the knowledge and patience necessary to help others improve their performance. The demonstration also sparked broader interest in the technical aspects of extreme long-range shooting. Ballistics research, equipment development, and training methodologies all benefited from increased attention and investment as more people became interested in exploring the limits of what was possible. Sarah's shot had opened a door to possibilities that many had never seriously considered. As months passed, Sarah continued competing and achieving success at national-level events, but she never forgot the canyon where everything had changed. She returned regularly to practice and reflect, sometimes bringing students or fellow competitors who wanted to experience the unique conditions that had made her famous shot possible. The transformation from underestimated amateur to recognized expert was complete, but Sarah understood that reputation required continuous validation through consistent performance. She had proven what was possible once, now the challenge was proving that it hadn't been luck or accident but rather the result of skills and knowledge that could be applied repeatedly under various conditions. The shot that had begun as a response to condescension had evolved into something much larger, a demonstration that excellence could emerge from unexpected places and that the most dangerous assumptions are often the ones we make about people who don't fit our preconceptions. Sarah Mitchell had not only proven her abilities but had also changed how an entire community thought about skill, potential, and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to recognize genuine expertise.